Now, these are the headlines and stories in the news this morning that would inform our line of conversations on the program this morning. You're much invited to lend your thoughts, comments, and opinions as we dialogue on these stories. Discussing on our guest's feature this morning is the editor-in-chief of the Daily Courier, Mr. Seun Oni, who now joins us to dialogue on the issues in the news. Hello, good morning to you, Mr. Seun, and welcome to the conversation.
Good morning, Mr. Brian. What a sunny day. What a rainy, showering day over here in Abuja.
Well, that's been the trend. That's been the trend for the last 3 days now. Increased rainfalls. How have you been coping with the weather?
Well, that's what we asked for, so we're having the best of it.
Well, a good thing that we're not captured amongst the flash flood alert states, though. I can only imagine what other states that have fears of flooding are dealing with at the moment with this increased rainfalls.
It's been torrential in some parts of the country like Adamawa, and it's such a sad situation to see the annual flooding again really wreaking havoc in that part of the country. It's a sad thing.
Well, talking about Adamawa, we must also condole with those who lost loved ones. We hear that the death toll has crossed 5 with over 55 persons injured, whilst the National Emergency Management Agency has been on frantic rescue and search efforts over the last few days. Our condolences again to the government and good people of Adamawa. Now, that being said, let's come to a brighter story making the rounds. It's one that is also headlined on your newspaper this morning. How historic is a record 10th WAFCON triumph for the Super Falcons. And when we put it into reference, comparisons being made between the national honors given to the Super Eagles following their AFCON triumphs, where they came second place, as against the Super Falcons, who are continental queens. Persons are out with their calculators this morning, calculating over 4.59 billion naira splashed on the team to include the technical staff and also the goodwill coming in from the Nigerian Governors Forum as well. Let's get your thoughts on this story as we discuss it.
A beautiful adjective you used to qualify that: historic. Historic in the sense that we will better appreciate it if we could just play side by side the voice note by a veteran in female football administration in Nigeria and a very respected sport journalist, Aisha Falode, immediately after the presidential reception yesterday. She was teary and she said that this is the 10th AFCON, and this was the first time they will be hosted to a presidential reception. Before now, what they usually receive, press statement from the villa, some high-powered delegation from the villa, but this was the first time, despite the fact that they've won it 9 times before now. And to let you understand how much of a powerhouse the Super Falcons really are on the continent, I think they won it consecutively. The first 5 AFCON? They won it consecutively, and there was really no serious commitment or honor to show how much of glory they brought to the country Nigeria. And so, to situate it in that way, this is the 10th time they are winning it. The nation had really not deemed it fit to celebrate them the way we usually celebrate our Super Eagles. So it's worth it. Many people have actually asked questions. $100,000 naira equivalent on one person, that would be about
150 million naira using the current exchange rates.
That's a huge one if you use the current exchange rate across the banking sectors. So it's a huge one, and I think the backroom staff too will laugh because I can't recollect in our current history when any of the backroom staff have ever received such humongous amount of goodwill. So it's a huge one, and I really don't think that's too much to celebrate these people. You just need to see and follow the optics across social media trend for the past few days. Football, or let me say sport as it were, is such a unifying factor. You could see the unity, you could see the joy, and the more talked about lack of patriotism across the length and breadth of the country, we saw it in full display. There was no Hausa, no Igbo, no Yoruba, or any other of the many ethnicities across the country coming at each other's jugular. There was no Christian, Muslim. We just saw everyone elated, celebrating the victory that these stars had brought to the country. So I don't think that's too much to honor them due to the glory they brought to the country.
Now, Mr. Seun, one thing is the question that comes to mind. Over 27 years, like you rightly said, this is the first time they are treated to a presidential welcome. Does this speak to this administration's priority for sports in general? Because we've seen a backlog of salaries owed former national teams being cleared under this administration. I was listening to the president speaking, and he referenced the situation in the villa at the time, where he said that the first lady almost had to abandon his dinner owing to the tense nature of the game. Do you think it's because of the priority this administration has given to sports that we're seeing such remarkable feats?
I think it would be I don't think too early to say that would be the right word, since we've not had many sporting fiestas since he came on board. But I think there is something this administration had gotten right, that we have not given them their flowers, as it were. And that is, for the first time in a very long while, Nigeria is not having two of the greatest problems any economy can be confronted with. Let me reiterate that again. For a very long time, the nation had been boxed to a corner, where we have first a revenue issue, secondly, we have an expenditure issue. For a very long time, we are really spending what we were not making. We were borrowing on all fronts. That was why you had states like Kogi, Osun, Zamfara, and Benue, and many other states across the country, even on those states. We have states like that who were owing their teachers and civil servants, some of them for years, 2 years and more. Some states were paying half salary, some were paying percentage salary, and that continued for many, many months. This government came into place, and for the first time, even though we have not attained that level of revenue that we desire, Nigeria, hardly as it is, as we usually have it, we are really not having so much of a revenue problem. Remember what I said earlier? We used to have a revenue problem. We also have an expenditure problem. That is, we will borrow money that we don't have, and people will now steal what we borrow. So we have a revenue problem before we have an expenditure problem. But this administration have been able to pull us from that nadir, that low, that precipice. So for the first time, you could see that the government has been able to not just doling and what they call bailout during the immediate past administration. Governors now have resources to spend, thanks to the ingenuity of the federal government. And I'm surprised we are really not giving him his flowers. We must talk about that. And that, for me, is the reason why the president can just close his eyes and say he's giving each of the players $100,000 goodwill to make up for the 10 years that the nation had really not appreciated the women football. So beneath what we saw yesterday was a fine economic engineering that made resources available. Don't forget there have been succeeding administrations who promised and could not pay, not because they don't want to pay, but because they promise what they don't have. But we have seen a whole lot of changes here. Every time he makes promises, Days, weeks later, we are told the promises have been met. Of course, we knew the airline money that were trapped for many years. He came, he cleared it. That's a whole lot of financial wizardry. And people are really not giving the administration the flowers it deserves. And I think that had to be brought to the focus this morning.
Now, talking about the significance of this and the impacts on generations to come, what do you think this would do in shaping interest of youths in sports participation over time?
I think I support what the captain actually said yesterday, that the victory, the 10th WAFCON, and the way they were received would actually now set a benchmark for future young ladies who really want to have interest in sport. I think that is very correct. What we saw, not just from the AFCON triumph, but the way and manner the nation appreciated these stars, we also go to show that if you really, there was a friend, a more elderly person, he tweeted at me when I made a comment about the victory. He said, and somebody is telling him to discourage his son from playing football, that he will actually buy the boot, drive the boy to the training pitch to ensure that the child can rise to the place where he can start donning the green, white, green. As humorous as that is, that just tells you that what happened yesterday had actually also heightened the interest in sports in Nigeria. I just hope we can get it right, especially across the three tiers of our government, where the local government improve sports in Nigeria. We also have that at the state level, so that sports is not just treated shabbily the way it used to be before now. We can now have a more organized, a more viable sporting facilities that will now churn out sports stars that will be a big industry a few years from now, and Nigeria will be better for it. Like I always tell people, there is no way every one of us will bag a PhD. It's actually not possible. But we have some people who will thrive in sports, some will thrive in other spheres of human endeavor. But what's important is that as a nation, whichever route each one, whichever path, whichever course each one chooses to apply, the government gives all the platform, all the support that will make their choices eventually a worthwhile one.
Now, much credit must also go to Coach Justin Madugu, who, much like you rightly said, feels that this victory would drag more investments into sports in Nigeria. In the course of our conversation, we'll also look at some of the historic moments when they hoisted the trophy and upon their parade of the trophy. But the big question now is, some of the Falcon players had the opportunity to play for other nations, but they decided to play for Nigeria. You talked about this being the benchmark going forward. Do you think that because of this lack of such presidential receptions, we've seen other players, even in the men's football, resort to playing for other countries of their birth as against their nationalities?
Yeah, maybe I should also cite the example of one of our, I think she's in the track event, who had been in the news for a few weeks now on her plan to change allegiance to Turkey.
Favor Philly.
Yeah, Favor Ophili. Thank you so much, sir. And that just tells you, and she's not the first person who'll be muting that type of idea, because we've seen, I think there is one popular lady also who is on the tracks for Bahrain, and she's doing very well. We have a whole lot of them in the United States colleges who are doing very well, and they will really not budge an eye to change their allegiance to other country. Let me be very honest with you. There is a psyche in the country that many people really don't understand. For instance, while growing up, we had friends that we went through primary school together. but some due to financial issues, others because academically it was just obvious that they were not doing well. They dropped out at primary, some dropped out at secondary. But over the years, one of the things I've noticed is that those of you who, in spite of the odds, you kept pushing and you just kept on pushing and pushing. Maybe you have a degree. After your degree, you came back, you went for the youth corps, and maybe they learned you are working somewhere in the city. And they are somewhere in the village, maybe they are with their own level, they are into businesses. There is that unspoken expectation that, okay, I didn't go to the university, I didn't go do masters, I don't have all of these. Let's see what will become of him. It's also the same for people who make choices to go into sports and go into other areas. People are also saying the same thing because there were people who were not as favored as they are, who be hoping that they fail. Some be hoping they really don't do well. So they are there first to excel. Secondly, they are there to do well for themselves because the life cycle of an athlete is not forever. The peak age for most of them, by age 30, they are at the peak. If you are 35 and you have not found your groove, it's almost good as you will never find that peak. And so that's sport. That means it doesn't matter how favored you are. By the time you are 35, you have already climaxed. So anything you want to make in your 20s, you must have. So many of these people, because of the platforms we have here, the peak age when they are supposed to be thinking about retirement, that's when they are still hustling to be able to get some decent savings for themselves. So if the nation really don't take sports seriously, they will really not think twice before embracing other nations that are ready to secure their future. And maybe this is an opportunity to also call on the chairman, Seun Oni of the National Sport Commission. I think it's time to see how anyone who done the green, white, green, not just as a footballer, but in other sporting events, if there is a possibility of also ensuring that instead of just giving them those money, let's get some of this insurance firm come into play. Have an arrangement, maybe a percentage of their earnings. Because this idea of hearing retired sports stars coming on social media to beg for money, for health issues, for some other necessities, I think is disgraceful. It's really not what we should be hearing about. A number of nations have this type of arrangement. Maybe we can understudy what they are doing well to see how we can cater for these people. In the end, I've heard people say such thing as, but they are collecting their money. In fact, yesterday, one of the things people started saying is that you can't come years later after receiving 150 million in one single sweep and say Nigeria did not do you well. I done green, white, green. But I think we can have an institutional, systemic framework that caters also for these people, bearing in mind that they don't have forever to do what they are doing.
Well, very interesting thoughts you have raised there. Before we go even further, I would like to revisit the president's speech this morning on the program, and probably even the NFF chairman before we come to other issues in the news. Much like Mr. Seun Oni has said, for the first time in over 27 years, despite 9 consecutive wins, this is the first time the Super Falcons have received a presidential welcome. And this is probably translated into more patriotism and interest of Nigerian youths in venturing into sports. Well, in the course of the program, we would have the president's speech playback once it is ready. But let's come down to other issues of interest this morning on the program. It's with press freedom. The media rights advocate group has raised concerns, saying that they have received over 141 complaints of attack on journalists. They also, by inference, are implying that whilst the President Bola administration is getting it right in other areas, much like in sports, they might not be getting it so right in terms of allowing for press freedom and expressions through peaceful protest. Mr. Seun, what do you make of this report, and do you agree?
It is also my industry, so using agree maybe will not be the right thing, but I think the phrasing of the statement could better be done. Having said that, we have seen our democracy evolving over the years. We are no longer in the days where media houses are brazenly, by marked military personnel, whether it's talking about the DSS, the army, breaking into newsrooms, shutting it down, brazenly, without any fear or any iota of fairness in the very, sacrificial and sacred job that we are doing. I still recollect with nostalgia an event I covered a few years ago. And by the time I got home, it seriously, because of the very difficult nature of the thing, it actually impacted on my site. And nobody will pay me for that. That just tells you how difficult the job that we are doing really is. We've seen a number of our colleagues, they've lost their lives. Some doing this job, because of the nature of the job we do, actually have very adverse side effects. That when we are still walking around, we really don't know those effects until years later. We were in the newsroom a few weeks ago, and I just took notice. It just raised my eyes in the room. I think we were about 18 of us in that newsroom. It's a media center. And it occurred to me that more than 2/3 of the people in that newsroom were already using glasses. That tells you the side effects of the job we are doing. Most of them really do not have sight issues before now, but because they are always constantly, those in the print, you have to read, you have to put your eyes down the system, whether you're using your phone to file your news. Colleagues, those of you in the broadcast, you are sitting there hours daily, and eventually those things have a way of coming back to affect our health. We really don't want to also have a government that is not tolerant to dissenting view and views that seems is putting a spotlight on what they are doing. I think that will not be fair to those of us who are in the fourth estate of the realm. And I think the government must actually do things differently. And I'm also calling on, especially when we have a president who himself used to be a democracy fighter in his own right. He was one of the heroes of the June 12th. Revisionists have tried to say contrary, but at least we are students of history, even though we are young then. We read his role and things like that. So he should put his feet down, tell everyone in his cabinet to ensure that rights of journalists are respected. Many people, when they want to talk about security outfit and the rest of them, I think it's just basic government that whether you are saying police, you are saying army, they come under the purview of the executive. That is, any misdemeanor by the security agency definitely has the overt or covert backing of the executive. That's the implication. If the executive insists that those in the military, because they are the ones that are usually used to threaten and to make life difficult for journalists. But those in the executive, if they put their boots down and insist that no security outfit should allow himself to be used to humiliate, detain without any court order, and the rest of the things we see in the past few months in several parts of the country, I think we'll begin to breathe a sigh of relief as journalists working in this country.
Now, in terms of the numbers, this report has pegged it at 141 attacks on journalists in the last 2 years. Is it alarming? Does it change the narrative in any way or further buttress the point?
No, it's really nothing new. I'm happy we are now having the figures. You know, what we don't have before now is that we don't have more like a watchdog who keeps a tab on these attacks. And I won't be surprised if there are many unreported attacks because I've been privy to situations where journalists will be attacked in course of doing their job. Maybe you now raise an alarm to a senior official and they will now call you to judge your, you know, when you have some credit alert, you might not even bother to escalate it. So you have situations like that. So I really won't be surprised if the number is actually more than that. So that just goes to reinforce what I've said. I have to tell a DSS official sometimes ago, I was approaching the venue of an event, a high-powered meeting though. I was there on invitation. I have my IV and I showed him at the gate. The next thing, he was very rude. He shoved me aside. So I had to call. I told him, you are doing your job here. I'm also here to do my job. I really don't think we should be hostile towards one another. So it took the intervention of the people who actually invited us to cover the event to show up and doused the event. But I think that should be the atmosphere. Whether you're a security official, police, DSS, what have you, you are doing your job. Journalists are also there to do their job. There is a way we can work together, and the nation will only be better for it. I was nostalgic a few days ago when retired police officers were protesting, and I saw our colleagues there. They are the ones covering the event, trekked for kilometers with them, filed reports, broadcasts, print, radio. You know, we did a very elaborate job to highlight their plight. That is what we are there for, to ensure. You know, I also noticed this, but I've really not seen a thorough analysis on this. Maybe it's something we can take up. You know, how governors, presidents will be in power, try to muzzle journalists. And the moment they leave that place, they run back to journalists to help them. When they are now under the threat, when they are also, what they dish out to people then, when they are now at the receiving end, they run back to us and tell us to, please help us do this. This is the right side. But while you were there, you were not allowing journalists to do their job. So that's just a reality. Our leaders must know that our job is actually there to be fair to everyone. They should allow journalists to do their job. And this number, in my opinion, is actually not fair. And it's not good on the image of Nigeria as a country.
We're talking about rebuilding our image as a nation and also enshrining public trust. The Independent National Electoral Commission has held a recent press briefing in which they talked about lessons learned from the 2023 general election and how that would help in reshaping our electoral reforms pending legal backings. I don't know what you make of this new position of the INEC going into 2027's general election.
I think it's routine. Nothing really out of the world about it. ECOWAS observer missions were sent during the 2023 general elections. After observing the elections, they told the electoral umpire and several other military, paramilitary, civil society and non-government actors like the Association of Political Parties. They gave them some recommendations, what they should do differently going into future polls. And so they came back yesterday, a delegation from that ECOWAS observer mission returned back to INEC to follow up on INEC's commitment to implement some of those recommendations. And INEC was very clear. 13 recommendations in all were directly for INEC within INEC's purview. And INEC chairman yesterday, Professor Yakubu Mahmood, made INEC made the delegation realize that the 13 recommendations have actually been fully attended to, especially the ones that require administrative steps. But the ones that require the National Assembly to enact some new laws, change some other things, have also been forwarded to the National Assembly, expecting legislative action. So we are expecting that the onus is now the National Assembly to give legislative legal backings to some of those suggestions after extensively deliberating and asking for the input of the citizenry and experts in that field, so that in 2027, some of the downsides of 2023 elections, for instance, giving legal backing to some of the new technological innovations like the BVAS, the IREV. We want to see the National Assembly enact a law that will give not just a backing instrument, but also an instrument that can bite. That's what we want to see. We also want to see the National Assembly support diaspora voting. We want to see the National Assembly, for instance, support early voting by journalists, security personnel, and other people who are into very essential services like the health sector. So those are the type of things we want to see the National Assembly give vent to, so that our election can be tidied up and be better going forward.
Now, away from these 13 recommendations by ECOWAS, there's also another issue that is gaining traction. This is the issue of the possibility of conducting general elections using a single-day poll. Is this a possibility? We've seen part of the challenges that come with deploying electoral materials over time. Do you think that this conversation and the advocates who are proposing a single-day poll for the conduct of the 2027 general elections, do they mean well in all instances?
Well, we have seen nations who have successfully adopted that. I think the first the first benefit of a single-day election is that it will help us reduce costs. That is the first thing. Remember that the way we run our elections now, you will have to deploy not just men, you will deploy machines, you will deploy other logistics on that day. And it costs billions of naira to deploy those men, machines, and other logistics on election day. You know, the terrain of Nigeria is so vast that on election day, while we are using chopper, we are using canoes, using, simultaneously across the country. And so when you have those elections across 2 Saturdays, you are duplicating the same cost 2 times. But when you do it once, you are having a single budgetary allocation for that single day. Another pro for it is the fact that, this transference of what we have seen over the years is that any candidate that wins the presidential poll, which is usually the first one, the presidential and National Assembly polls that is usually conducted on the same Saturday, often now get what we call the herd mentality, all right? The following election, which is usually the state elections, the gubernatorial, the state houses of assembly elections. That's what we have noticed over the years. So there are people who have been saying, why not do everything on the same day, so that people can just make their choices in one full swoop. So we have this argument. On the other side, people have said nations who have practiced that usually have issues when it comes to mix up of some datas and complexities in bringing them together. So there we are. There are people who have also said a nation where we still have a high literacy rate, you might just have people modeling things if they have 4 papers or they have like 5 papers, 5 ballot papers on the same day. So the arguments are here and there. And so I think let's just allow the National Assembly. Is being pushed. I think the House of Rep has been very vocal about it. Let's get the input. We are in a democracy. Let's get the input of Nigerians across the board. And I think the National Assembly will do well to allow very extensive deliberation on this so that we just adopt what is best for us as a country. But like I said, whichever format we are looking at, the most important thing is that the practitioners must ingrain what you call the tenets of democracy. Because if we do election on the same day, if this attitude of most of our politicians going violent and all of that, you still discover that elections will still be shifted from that day and you will have to conduct it on another day. So it's an attitudinal thing for me. Whether you do it one day or you do it maybe 2 Saturdays like we used to do. I love saying this, and let me say it quite emphatically again. Our democracy will become that brilliant, excellent process we desire it to be when the politicians choose to now begin to imbibe the real cultures of democracy.
Now, still sticking with INEC, but this time on the chairmanship position, Professor Yakubu Mahmood is nearing a conclusion of a tenure which many people are debating on where the next successor would emerge from in terms of the geopolitical zones. Big debates are also on the president's prerogative to appoint INEC chairman. It's been a very, would I call it, heated debate when it comes to the position of the INEC chairman over the years. What antecedents can be created in the emergence of a successor for Professor Yakubu?
Beautiful question, but I think that argument is coming a bit late. Professor Yakubu has just a few months to go. So, where he'll become, whether the president will appoint the next person, I think is already a done deal. There is no alteration to the constitution that will pass in the few months that we have now. Because I think the most he has now should be sometimes in October, November. By November, he'll be 10 years. October, November, 10 years in the saddle. And so that's when he'll be exiting. So there is no law we can pass between now and then. But the president can actually support to ensure that going forward, maybe we have a separate institution to help us determine who gets it, so that we now begin to appoint the electoral czar by more, we make it more democratic, so that the best can be given the opportunity to run their affairs. No, we have this conversation sometimes ago, and I quickly drew an inference from an advert that was made a few years ago. I don't know if you could still recollect, when the apex body for the appointment of judicial officers in Nigeria, when they advertised that lawyers who are into private practice, who are in the bar, if they want to come to the bench, they should submit or apply. And we saw some of the fine brains we had then, people like Olisagbakoba, and some of those names, they applied. Years after, what actually came out of it? So I think we have this culture in this nation where we like just maintaining the status quo. And so this argument has gone on for far too long, that the president shouldn't be the one appointing who the INEC chairman is. But the fact that we had it up to this time is still something that amazes me. Having said that, I think a northerner shouldn't be the INEC chairman again.
Why so?
In my very firm opinion.
Why so?
Yeah, we've had, maybe northerner shouldn't be the right word to use. Maybe let's get someone from the south. After having a Professor Jega, having a Professor Yakubu, that's cumulatively about 15 years. It's just fair, since, like I rightly put it, we can't have maybe an independent body appointing the next INEC chairman. Then maybe somewhere from the south, the southeast, we can have someone with very impeccable character, someone with a track record of honesty.
But Mr. Shehu, sorry to cut you. You know, with the unspoken rule of having to zone the position that produces the president, when this rule is in place, it also, in a way, has the sentiments of the region that is also supposed to chair the position of the independent electoral umpire. Do you think this unspoken rule of rotation of power between zones and the emergence of the next INEC chairman might be in conflict in some terms?
Unfortunately, I don't see that in conflict. If we have a system, for instance, like how the Chief Justice of the Federation emerges, like the person who is there now, I think is from the same state with the president. But nobody is saying anything because it's an institutional arrangement. Okay? So, even while she's in office, except for death or sickness, we already know who will be the next INEC chairperson, Chief Justice of the Federation. That is institutional. All right? When we can get to that point, when we can begin to have a semblance of that, I really don't know. But I think that's the best for a nation as this, because the moment you begin to allow discretion, you have introduced what we call corruption into it. Anywhere you have discretion, you will have corruption. That's the truth. And some of the memos, biographies, autobiographies, you can just study. That's always an underlying fact. You know, someone is given the power of discretion, and it just tells you, so person, I have followed his track record. But you will read the track record of that person vis-a-vis maybe 5-10 other persons, and you know his track record is nothing compared to those people. That just tells you his discretion is used in a manner that he felt is the best, and you can't do anything. It's a constitutional power that is given to the president. So whether the next INEC chairman will come from the southwest, whether it will come from the south or the southeast, unfortunately, it's now left to the discretion of the president. And I don't see any clash there, because the constitution already gives him that power to use his discretion.
Very well said. Now, in closing, it's not news. Endorsements ahead of 2027 are thickening by the day. The most recent is what is being termed as a solidarity rally in Ekiti, where ex-governors converged to make a position on the endorsement of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for his re-election bid in 2027. Let's get your opinion on that solidarity rally. Although there were a few notable absentees, does this change any position? What the Ekiti people are saying is their choice for 2027.
Well, Ekiti is actually my state, and I saw it coming just a year into his government. The way and manner, his civility, he's a bridge builder. He's been able to mend discording political divides that have always thrown the state into hysteria before now. Of course, before now, Ekiti is known to always be a battlefield of political gladiators. But one of the things he succeeded in doing the moment he won the election was to quickly go to work to bridge bridges rather than raising the fences that have divided these political gladiators. So the first year, that was what he succeeded in doing. And from that point, I told everyone that it would be difficult for anyone to contest against him when he chooses to run for the second tenure. So I really don't see any surprise by what happened yesterday. But unfortunately, what we saw yesterday, in my opinion, not just as a journalist, but as also someone from that state, does not really commensurate with the level of work that is expected of the governor. And I think he has really not done so well in terms of the huge expectation that was placed on him. Maybe as a way to further reiterate my point, he was, or he is, the first governor that we can call a homegrown governor. He schooled in Ekiti. His entire political journey, or his very visible functions were performed entirely in Ekiti. He was in Otunba Niyi Adebayo's government, that's 1999, when Nigeria returned to democracy, barely 3 years after Ekiti State was created in 1996 by the late military junta Sani Abacha. After Fayemi's government, after Niyi Adebayo's government, we had the Fayoshe's government. He had the hectares for a few years. By the time the next government of Seun Oni came in, he was on hectares. But by the time Fayemi came in, he was there for his first tenure, he was there for his second tenure. He's always been in our face in Ekiti. So when he was thrown up as candidate of the APC, my thinking then was that since he had always been a part of the system, he's abreast of all the problems, and he will just go and start working. But we have seen a very snail pace of progress in Ekiti. We have seen progress, but a snail pace. Better things can be done. For instance, most of the roads in Ekiti are impassable. That's not really good for a state that is largely civil service and agrarian. It's really not good for us. And there are certain projects I think he embarked on that I think Ekiti really, we do not need that for now. But I don't know why that is. Would you
care to name a few? Would you care to name a few of some of those projects which you feel are not priority projects?
For instance, economic activities are practically been paralyzed in the state capital due to the flyover that is constructing in a place where we really don't have traffic gridlock before now. Economic activities have gone down in the heart of Ekiti, which is at Ekiti, where you have the market junction, the Oba's palace into other parts of Ekiti. Is actually a no-no for me. There is no need doing that. He was supposed to focus on ensuring that the intra roads are passable. And I don't really want to talk about the federal roads, even though he's part of the ruling party, and you think that a whole lot should be done. The road that entered Ekiti from Kogi State, of course, my hometown, Nomoke Ekiti, which is the border town connecting Yamoye to Kaba, when you are coming to Abuja, is impassable. The road that entered Ekiti from the Ondo State Axis is impassable. The road that entered Ekiti, when you are coming from Osun State, is not good. The road linking Ado Ekiti, Ikere to Akure, two state capitals, neighboring states, is impassable. So I can go on and on and on and on. This should be the priority for the government so that the state economy can thrive and not just the photo ops that we have been seeing for the few months.
Well, We must thank you, Mr. Seun Oni, for taking out time, first speaking as a true son of Ekiti and prioritizing the government's attentions to ongoing projects in the state, and also sharing your objective opinions on other issues in the news. You're much appreciated.
Always a pleasure to be on ADB, and thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your day.